let's do this, Matt, before we move on to the commissioner's position, because we're waiting on the commissioner on H313. If you could just, without any questions really, just explain to us the other two issues very briefly that you wanted to raise with the committee.
Certainly. So the two components that were removed from our bill, one of which is to allow licensee holders, so operators, to use credit cards, to use company credit cards to purchase product from distributors, beer and wine for first and second class licensees, again on credit cards, and also to be able to use credit cards at the state outlets for the purchase of spirits. They're currently not allowed to do that. It's only cash and check. I have had conversations at length with the department, and we did cover this in committee. We just ran out of clock. And so we hope to continue that conversation with you folks. The other piece was around third-party operators. And there's like a loose nexus to alcohol on this, but it was more how they engage with displaying menus and whatnot on their platforms. Operators have been running into issues with third-party hosts posting menus and information on websites that the operators are not aware of. So we're running into examples of people are actually trying to like order food through a platform that a restaurant doesn't actually have a relationship with. And customers are calling wondering where their food are. And we have no idea what you're talking about because we have no relationship with these. So there's a just an operational barrier there, I guess.
Yep.
And then the other component was the one I referred to that was brought to my attention just yesterday. And that was in regards to Tide House law. And that was something Alan Newman and Patty Comline at Downs Rockland Martin brought up, looking at a component of Tide House law. And
where you're mandated to own the building,
correct,
as opposed to renting it. Okay.
No, not the building. It's about it is more about the prohibition of ownership across all tiers, and taking a look at like how certain aspects of ownership to be able to access like the tier system a little bit more openly, and taking a look at how our laws could parallel federal law a little bit better.
So all three of these issues are things that your committee is interested in but ran out of time to do. It's not that they ran into controversy right off the bat.
Correct. So the first two the committee discussed. That last component about the Tide House aspect was just brought to my attention day before yesterday.
Okay, good. Thank you for everything today, Matt. We're going to move on to the commissioner and the deputy commissioner. It's your choice who wants to speak, but we're going to talk about both this bill and the governor's or your proposals on gambling in the remaining time. And we'll start with the bill itself. So whether it's Commissioner Delaney or Deputy Commissioner Kessler who will talk about the bill, the floor is yours.
I do see it looks like Commissioner Delaney is on. Patrick, can you?
Gary,
Yes,
why
you
don't you
are.
go ahead?
Okay. Well, I guess as far as the bill goes, I was hoping you might address some of that, and I'm happy to pull it up. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay,
So I was having a little IT problem here.
very good.
Pat,
Apologies. Likewise.
Commissioner, we can't.
Anyway, if we're talking about,
Patrick, Commissioner, you're on the
Can
phone.
you hear me?
Right?
Right,
Yes.
he's on the phone because he's having internet connectivity problems, so he can only
okay.
call in. So you won't be able to see him, and I couldn't get connected.
I'm not on the phone.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
No,
Okay,
I'm not on the
can't-
phone.
We just
Can you
can't.
hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you, but that's okay.
I actually,
if you could put your visual on
All
there.
right.
There you go.
Here I am. I'm
Yeah.
turning my video off
Okay, good.
because it will improve my broadband. I have a weak.
Okay,
So, House Bill 313. Basically, the bill, as we know, has been in the works for the past 2 sessions at least. I think the consensus with the stakeholders, the department, really on all the issues that were passed over from last year, we're in agreement that the proposal should move ahead. Obviously, I got on a couple minutes late. I heard Representative Barong discussing some proposals that didn't cross the finish line. I'm assuming those might have been fee waivers for licenses, discount for licensees on product purchase from the department, and issues of that nature. As you're aware, those did not pass the finish line. And it was actually House Appropriations that took a look at some of the fees and chose not to pass those forward. But if you have some specific questions, I would be probably better at addressing your points of interest or concerns.
okay. Do you specifically, do you support all aspects of H 313 as passed the House?
I would say yes.
Okay. And can you talk to us a little bit about the takeout of alcoholic beverages? We've talked a bit earlier this morning that in some ways it's drafted as a permissive law. Is it your intent to move forward with that enabling legislation to allow for 2 years of takeout beverages?
The department supports the concept, Senator. We have some expectations regarding definitions of closure for basically mixed drinks or distilled spirit-based cocktails. Our concern at this point is that the open container law is essentially unenforceable unless we have some way to determine whether or not a to-go alcoholic beverage has been opened and consumed on its way home. So we feel that as long as we can come up with a consensus on what is appropriate to close the packaging, I don't think we have any particular issues involved with to-go containers. Now, there was some discussion about providing delivery services for to-go alcoholic beverages. And that is an issue we do have some concern about. Basically, we are under the impression that the likelihood of ID checking under those circumstances, takeout, third-party delivery is unlikely based on what we have observed in the past. So we have a general concern about allowing uncertified, unlicensed delivery services to provide beverage alcohol delivery to private residences.
Is that allowed under H 313 that you not only take
Um,
out, you could
There
actually
was
deliver?
I believe that there was a stipulation in the to-go container proposal that indicated it would be appropriate for delivery of alcoholic beverages by third parties. And those are companies like Uber Eats, and as we know, a popular new means of connecting restaurants with consumers.
I-
So that is an issue
May-
that we have.
see
May
some-
I?
I see some consternation from our council. Tucker, can
Okay,
you
please.
explain, first of all, is the takeout provisions for alcohol in H 313, does that extend to delivery to someone's home?
For first and third class licensees, yes, they are permitted to deliver the containers of alcohol. It does not extend to third party delivery platforms under this. There may be some confusion with the provisions that Representative Byrong brought up earlier that were in H 313 as introduced that dealt with menus and services offered by third-party delivery platforms, but those were taken out. They don't have a nexus with the to-go portion of this bill. And separately, there was a bill introduced in the House that would have allowed the department to review and approve third-party delivery platforms for the delivery of sealed containers of alcohol, but that has not been incorporated here and it has not moved forward.
Okay.
And may I, so with that third party conversation, the around like the Uber Eats and what have you, is my opinion, and through committee discussion, that we were not comfortable allowing them to deliver alcohol from the third party component because they were not directly insured or gone through compliance training by the operators of the business. So I don't find the concept of allowing the third party operators to do alcohol delivery. I don't think that is something that we should find favorable.
Okay, we'll talk more about that, obviously, because I have, you
Yeah.
know, it's kind of, because then it gets into, okay, they can do partial delivery, but not full delivery, or certain items they can deliver, not others. And then you have your menu question. So it's another topic of conversation. Okay.
That was the rabbit hole I was trying to avoid, Senator.
Right. So I guess one last question for the commissioner is, we've identified that the law is enabling and that it doesn't have to go forward depending upon not so much what you decide, but what the Board of Liquor and Lottery decided. I'm always confused as to and I know it's been a topic of conversation, the varying powers here. So my understanding is the way H313 is written is that the Board of Liquor and Lottery has to pass regulations or allow for this policy in H313 to go forward. So when you say you're supportive, does that mean the Board of Liquor and Lottery is supportive? I hate to be so crass to ask the question that way, but I'm trying to get a feel for where the power lies.
No, that's an excellent question. I would answer that question by saying that the department supports the bill. The board basically functions as a overseer of the operational aspect of the department, and they also adjudicate cases, as you know, and part of that is approving regulations. The regulation aspect of this discussion is providing regulatory discretion or direction on closures and containers, things of that nature.
Right.
But I feel the board is in support of H13, and I believe the department can speak on their behalf with confidence.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. Okay. Senator Clarkson.
Now, Commissioner, I'm just curious, how much oversight and checking in did your department, specifically your law enforcement branch of your department, do with the compliance around the to-go cocktails and because this is, the House committee did not hear from law enforcement on this. I'm just curious if your law enforcement arm was at all involved and if there were issues that came up.
Thank you for that question. I would say the answer to that question is that the to-go environment clearly creates a very challenged compliance and enforcement scenario. Obviously, on-premise consumption creates an environment where the observation of practices, consumption, et cetera, is possible. And clearly on to-go, they are not. So I would be inclined to characterize the compliance efforts as sporadic, a little bit of Russian roulette. Of course, that's an aspect of all compliance activities, but it certainly creates an additional level of complexity in terms of how to effectively ID people, make sure that the person delivering is doing that. It would require compliance activities that currently we do not undertake. And it clearly does present some control, public safety, compliance, and enforcement complications.
And have you been following the increase in alcohol I mean, I know you've benefited from the increase in alcohol consumption the department has in terms of revenues, which there's been a significant increase in alcohol purchase and revenue. I'm just curious if you at the same time also followed the spike in DUIs and alcohol problems. I mean, this is one of our huge cost drivers in the state, dealing with alcohol.
Right.
Challenges with the law. It's hundreds of millions of dollars of cost to the state. So I'm just curious if you have also tracked that.
Well, again, that highlights an area that is idiosyncratic regarding the COVID period. On one hand, we have increased consumption. On the other hand, we have essentially a closure of the on-premise. And at the same time, we have a dramatic decrease in the amount of traffic on the highways and on surface roads. Basically, the correlation here, I think, as we all know, is that even though we have less traffic, we still have the same amount of traffic accidents. Obviously, that is concerning. Most of the correlations, if you will, are somewhat anecdotal, just like the point that I just mentioned to you. We can correlate decreased traffic, we can correlate these other factors, but at the same time, we have the same amount of traffic accidents. That would indicate maybe the non-consumers are staying home and not driving home from the bar at night, so to speak. It's really quite a odd environment to create any statistical models. Now, I will share with the committee that the Office of Compliance and Enforcement has instituted a statewide program called Point of Last Drink. This is now a standard procedure in police agencies throughout the state, where if an individual is pulled over for drinking or under the influence of other substances, there's a mandatory question asking if they have been at a licensed establishment. So we're starting to create a database and a communication flow between community law enforcement organizations in our department to follow up on establishments that have been identified as participating in a night out for somebody that just blew a .23. So we're attempting to create our own data through this practice, which has actually been quite effective. But honestly, it's been an environment that data collection has been challenged. I just mentioned a number of factors that really make deductive reasoning quite challenging.
Thanks. Yes, look, actually, you're right. Volume of traffic is down, DUIs are up. So it'll be curious to hear what law enforcement, how they weigh in on this.
Okay.
Right.
So, Senator Brock.
Commissioner, we looked at the amount of alcohol that a person can obtain at a festival. And I think for beer, for example, it was the equivalent of 5 12-ounce bottles of beer. Is that a good amount? Is that an amount that you're comfortable with?
I appreciate that question, Senator Brock. I would be inclined to state first and foremost that the quantities that we originally arrived at, in lieu of no quantities previously, were a collaborative effort with the industry, with people in the hospitality and event staging industry. And quite honestly, I would characterize the average alcohol units. Those are how we created a common denominator between beer, wine, and spirits. I would describe those as liberal. I would suggest as a regulator, I'd be inclined to be a little less liberal, but I would like to point out to you and the committee that this is a collaborative effort. We've created a maximum ceiling to start with, and I guess we'll have to see how that works out. But I wouldn't suggest to you that I'm totally comfortable with those amounts, but I would characterize the discussions as a compromise.
As you look at the amount of alcohol, how do the fair operators regulate that?
Well, the operators generally dispense some type of, shall we say, currency. If it's a ticket, if it's a token, generally when you enter, you're given X amount of tokens. Let's say it's 5 tokens. So you have the opportunity to sample 5 products. And that is how the operators, how they regulate the flow. Obviously, in some cases, you can purchase additional collateral. At that point in time, visual impairment and some other more standard impairment assessment tools come into play.
Thank you.
Sort of like Rex Center, Brock.
Sort of like Rex, but you buy the Rex in advance before anybody knows you're impaired. It's only after you've used the Rex do they recognize that.
Okay.
May I offer like an anecdotal piece to that?
Okay. So very briefly, please.
Very briefly. So the way I look at the festival thing is each individual operator is engaging with the consumer at that like point of contact, and then they move on to the next table. There is a structure involved here. Now, if you go to Church Street and people are bar hopping, it's essentially the same functional concept, but there is no actual structure on like points of consumption. So I think there's a parallel to table hopping in a recreational bar hopping environment and table hopping in something like this, where we are actually offering more structure here than we do on our average main streets.
Okay, I have one final question for Tucker on alcohol. So has there been, well, you might not know the answer, but I'm just wondering, there's talk about the emergency order ending. I'm wondering about the transition to this law, assuming it would pass. And, you know, people say, I don't think it's as long as this, but some people say you go through LCAR and rulemaking, it could be 6 to 8 months. Can this law operate in the absence of regulations? Or if the governor ends the executive order, are we in limbo for 6 to 8 months until the regulations pass? I'm not sure this would qualify for an emergency rule to protect the health and safety of the public, to make sure they have easy access to alcohol. So do you have any thoughts on that at all?
You were reading my eyes as you were going through that I was about to dive into emergency rulemaking authority and that it might not apply here. So the law itself is self-actualizing, self-effective, right? It goes into effect on July 1st. It is there. The board and the local control commissioners have the authority immediately. And then the rulemaking authority in that subsection D is discretionary. So the law could operate on its own and just allow the department to move forward with the minimum standards in the statute and authorize the licensees to carry on. Beyond that, it seems like the discretion given to the board and the local control commissioners here, that it could take the 6 to 8 months for full rulemaking to take place. And I think you're correct that 8 months is the maximum time limit, but honestly for LCAR process is the average.
But you're saying that there's enough in the underlying bill to allow the basic license and concept to go forward.
Yes, but again, that is up to how the department is going to carry this out. If the department and the board feel that it is appropriate to make the authorization contingent on the rules, for example, around the label requirements and the tamper evidence seals, they could not authorize licensees to carry on this business until the rules are in place. And
what if we change the may to shall? Would that have any difference?
May to shall would require the board and the local control commissioners to authorize this as soon as the statute becomes effective.
Okay.
And then the rulemaking would fill in the details after that.
Thank you.
May I make a suggestion?
Go ahead, but very quickly.
Yes, I wonder if we might, instead of going through formal rulemaking, the legislation would allow the Board of Liquor and Lottery to put a regulation in place rather than a rule. So there would just be something less formal than a rule. You could still require that we have public hearing or something else associated with it to hear from the industry, but that would be much more flexible. And it wouldn't take 6 to 8 months, and we could get what we needed in and protect people and also make this effective.
Now, I think you're talking about procedures. Rules and regulations are the same, but procedures are far less.
Procedures, yeah, I think that, right, that would be fine.
Okay, we might consider that. It might be a good idea. Thank you, Gary.
You're
So
welcome.
now I'm going to turn it over to Gary to talk about the governors or the administrations or the departments' proposals on gambling. We, Senator Brock and I had a presentation on this in finance. I don't know why, but way back when, and Gary has some interesting slides that I thought it really should, the committee should hear from him about these proposals. So the floor is yours, Gary.
All right, I will try to share my screen. I don't know if I have the authority or not. It does say I'm co-host, so I'll hit share screen. And let's see if I can come upon it here. Let's see, this one hopefully will do it. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes, excellent. All right, so I guess I hear the chair mentioned, gambling expansion. Really, we're phrasing this more as lottery modernization. And it's an opportunity to generate some additional revenue for the state by keeping the lottery relevant to the residents of the state and to the people that want to play the lottery. So there were basically 3 components to this lottery modernization effort: iLottery, sports betting, and Kino. And I'll just walk you through them relatively quickly here. So iLottery is really, and I won't read through the slides, is really the future of lottery play. People are doing everything online. iLottery just moves lottery into the online space. Effectively, it allows people to play the games that we already offer, like Powerball, Mega Millions, Lucky for Life. All the draw games would be available to purchase online. So that would be one plus. But in addition, we would have these e-instant games, which are like the instant scratch games that we have now, but they would be online. They could also be for much smaller amounts. You can't print a game and distribute it and sell it for a dime or a nickel a play, but you can do that with e-instant games. Our sister state next door, New Hampshire, rolled out iLottery, sports betting, and Kino all in the last few years. They've had great success with all of them, but iLottery really has been the biggest success. And I'll tell you, some of the benefits of iLottery is that there's age verification that's built in. We know who our customers are. We know how much they're spending on lottery products, and we can give them more information about problem gambling treatment that we provide for free to people that are interested in it. We can send them messages related to that. We can set limits to how much they can play each day. They can set limits too if they want to exclude themselves or maintain only a set amount of play per day. So that's all part of the control center related to iLottery. Again, there's a responsible gaming dashboard that's part of the iLottery environment. So the first year revenue, we'd be looking at first full year, $2.1 to $3 million is the estimate based on what I've seen in other states. And it's not like we would be the second state to do it. Quite a large number of states now offer iLottery and have found a huge amount of success with it. And it continues to grow. And I suspect down the line, it will rival at some level the regular lottery products that are sold. And I would expect, in ensuing years, the business would continue to grow and would get closer to half the business of our regular lottery within a relatively short period of time.
Gary, can I ask you a question on those?
Yes.
Figures? Could you go back to that slide?
Yes.
Is this additional revenue, or is this potentially stopping the bleeding of the lottery going down, through the kiosk sales or the convenience store sales? Is this above and beyond that? And are they projected in this nowadays to be losing ground? I don't understand whether the
Sure.
relationship.
So
existing
So this would be additional gaming that would take place above and beyond what we're already seeing. In fact, the states that have rolled out iLottery find that they engage with a different demographic, a wider demographic. I think it's really important for any business to meet its customers where they want to be met. And we have a demographic now of younger people that don't carry cash in their pocket, and lottery is a cash product. It's sold for cash, and they don't have cash in their pockets, so they don't play lottery. So essentially, we'd be reaching out to that demographic and meeting them where they want to be met on their mobile devices, on their computers, and so it would expand the business. It doesn't move the business from one pocket to the other here. It grows the business essentially. And I understand your comment about lottery going down. It really, we've been doing quite well. I would expect this year that we will have record revenues and record sales and record profits for the state. I think for the first time, the lottery will generate over $30 million in revenue for the education fund. So I think we're doing fairly well, but these additional opportunities, this modernization of the lottery would generate that much additional money. I mean, I think in the first 12 or 24 months, we would add at least $10 million more to lottery revenues for the education fund if we had all these opportunities.
Okay.
So did that answer your question?
It does, yes.
Okay. And we should just add to that too, that it gets people who have not traditionally played lottery interested. And it also, at least in all the states that have rolled it out, have found that it increases sales at the, at our brick and mortar locations as well. So it doesn't take away, it's not taking away from those sales. It actually adds to them. So Kino, I don't know how many of you know about Kino, but it's really more of a social game, primarily played in bars and restaurants. It would generate revenue for those bars and restaurants because they make a percentage of the sales that take place on the machines, and the machines are capable of selling draw game tickets as well, as I say, like Powerball, Mega Millions, Mega Bucks. New Hampshire. I'm sorry.
This is the proposal to legalize Kino. We don't have Kino yet.
We do not have Kino at this point. That is correct. And the reason we don't have Kino is because a number of years ago, the legislature modified the statute around lottery to prohibit lottery products from being sold in licensed establishments. So those would be places that sell alcohol. And that's basically where Kino is predominantly played. We could have Kino potentially in our agency stores, but it's possible to sell it in those stores. It's the kind of game where people tend to hang around and wait for the next draw to see if their numbers come up. So it's not necessarily the best fit for people to hang around a convenience store waiting, but it's much better if you're, having a meal, you can buy some draws and you can, watch them come up while you're eating. Or if you're at a bar, while you're hanging out, you have an opportunity to also play Kino. So it isn't presently allowed in licensed establishments. I would just mention that the legislature does allow gambling in licensed establishments. In fact, a very high level of gambling would break open tickets. That's unregulated gambling effectively. But this would be very regulated gambling, and it would be done through the lottery and our gaming system vendor. So Kino is just a quick number pick game. Yes.
For a second. When you say we do allow gambling in licensed facilities, break open tickets are totally legal in the state of Vermont, but they're just not regulated at all?
Well, a few years ago, the legislature provided the department with gave the department the obligation to monitor some of the sales around break open tickets. After Commissioner Delaney and I started and we had a look at that, we asked the legislature for additional authority just to get a better sense of what was actually happening, to try to close the circle a little bit on information and knowledge. And that's been, effective. We have a little better picture, but we've also done many investigations into where the money goes and it often isn't ending up where it's supposed to go. So I would say it's in many ways unregulated, and there's certainly unscrupulous sellers out there. And I will make a distinction, because otherwise I'll hear from the fraternal organizations out there that sell break open tickets for their own benefit. I mean, they're selling them to support their entity, their organization. And we don't have any interest in interfering or regulating what they're doing. They should be paying attention for their own well-being, because this is money that their organization needs to operate. And so they have every incentive to pay attention. But what we have often seen is that a bar will say, I'll sell break open tickets to benefit some youth sports league or animal rescue league or whatever it may be. And they promise them some set amount, and they sell a lot more tickets than that. And the organization just doesn't even know how much is being sold and what they really should be entitled to. So that was one of the things we were trying to do, is close the informational loop on that, to try to prevent that kind of money being embezzled, essentially, from what's supposed to be going to nonprofit organizations.
Okay. Let's move on and describe what Kino is.
So Kino is almost like a bingo sort of a game. You pick how many spots you want to bet on. Here's a Kino slip from New Hampshire. If you were to bet on 12, the opportunity to win, and they all came up, you'd win a lot of money. So you can pick how many spots you want to bet on, and then you'd pick what the spots would be, 1 through 80. And the game can be modified in many different ways. You can pick a number of draws that you want to play. So you can see down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, this is on the slip, but you can also just do it at the actual Kino vending machine, and pick how many draws you want to take place.
Essentially, it's like the simplistic explanation would be, there's a draw happening every 5 minutes. So before that draw happens, I pick number 46, and I bet $1 on number 46. Then the numbers start appearing, and if number 46 comes up, you win.
That's right. You got it. Okay. That explains the game right there. And again, you could bet on 5 numbers, 6 numbers. There's a range you can bet on. Obviously, the odds get more difficult, but the winning gets, the amount you win is higher as a consequence. So if you just bet on one spot and you bet $1 and your number comes up, you'll win, $2 or $4. There's a whole chart that I didn't include in here.
How many numbers come up in a draw? 20?
Yes. And again, the rules are all very variable. I mean, we could organize it any way we want, but there's sort of a standard way. So here's the revenue projection, again, about $2 to $3 million, and this amount would grow in the following years as we got more retailers engaged and interested in hosting Kino in their bars and restaurants. It really, again, it provides them some extra revenue without a lot of extra work. It provides sort of free entertainment to their customers that aren't paying a band to play. Although bands are lots of fun, they just have the Kino machine, and it's just an opportunity for them to generate revenue from those Kino sales.
So the difference, just so I'm get my bearings here, in Kino and iLottery, those are not ongoing, illegal, non-authorized enterprises in Vermont right now, but sports betting, which you're getting on, is going on in Vermont right now.
I would say a version of iLottery is available to people now as well. So if you want to go on and play a slot machine game online, which is like an iLottery type game, it's not exactly the same, but it's online betting, and through your computer or mobile device, that's available now. So there's no protection for Vermonters who play, a slot machine based in, some distant country, as far as the information they provide for their banking, or whether they get paid. There's no protection for them at all. But it's not very hard if you just go online and search, online slot machines, you'll find lots of vendors that are happy to take your money and let you play on their online version of the game. So that's a lot like iLottery. So that is happening.
Okay.
And sports betting, as you mentioned, is something that you could engage with now online. It's not illegal per se, but there's no protection for the players, and that it's in often other countries. And they're collecting information about the players. They can have the players' banking information. So there's a lot out there. This, in some ways, this provides protection to Vermonters that want to bet on sports. Sports betting is legal in New Hampshire. They have multiple channels, which again, I think we would look at least several of the three possible channels for sports betting. As I mentioned here, it's unregulated offshore companies that people can bet with now. And I think Senator Sears had some experience with that when he was looking at this. So here's some of the betting that's going on in New Hampshire. They have a contract with DraftKings. They're the sole provider for mobile sports betting in New Hampshire. And I think they also got the contract for setting up brick and mortar locations as well. So you just play on their mobile app and you can bet. And here's just an example of how hard it is to find sports betting. If you want to go ahead and bet, there's just a Google search away to get there. So sports betting, again, we're looking in the similar range, $2 to $3 million. Yes.
Sorry, may I just interrupt you? New Hampshire, we keep talking about New Hampshire. They've gone to e-lottery. They do sports betting. What about Massachusetts and New York?
So Massachusetts and New York are both looking at adding sports betting to what they have on offer. I understand that there's a parking lot just over the bridge in New York, in New Jersey, and that it's very full all the time of New Yorkers, because the way they regulate who can bet on these platforms is it's geo-fenced. So you have to be within the state in order to bet. And so people would drive over into New Jersey and park in this parking lot and place their bets and just turn around and drive back home. So that's, there's a lot of traffic, I guess, in that parking lot.
Is there geo-fencing for how you get the money if you win?
No, there is not. No. Money goes into you can withdraw the money from the service.
You only need to be physically present in the state when you place the bet, not when you don't have to park the money or receive the money in that state.
No, it just goes to a bank account. They wouldn't limit it to where banks are all over the place. If you have an account with, I don't know, Capital One or Citibank or TD Bank, there are bank branches all around. So they wouldn't have any way to know that, but they do know where your mobile device is at the time you're placing the bet. So that's how they restrict who can do it, because it's legal in one state and not legal in another. Again, keeping in mind that these are legitimate businesses that are doing that. These offshore businesses don't really care where you are. As long as you have money, they're happy to take it from you, which is likely what happens. But they're operating without any concern about compliance with a state's law or U.S. law. So that's a little bit different.
I don't know if you're going to get to this, but what was a few years ago, we dealt with a bill dealing with sports betting. What was it called?
Fantasy sports?
Fantasy sports, right. We were told at that point that there were like 80,000 Vermonters who are already doing that, and we might as well regulate it. We were losing some resources. We were losing protections for people. Do we have any numbers as to an estimate of how many people are doing sports betting in the state of Vermont through these offshore companies or whatever?
I do not have any. I don't have a good way to know how to get that. I don't think those offshore companies want to share their customer list or what state they're located in, if they even care about, if they even collect it in that way. So I don't have that information to share with you. I think with the fantasy sports, it was often done on these platforms that have now become sports betting platforms. So somebody like DraftKings or FanDuel, they started in some ways on the fantasy side. and then expanded out into sports betting once it became legal.
If you can't ballpark how many people are doing online sports betting in the state of Vermont now, how do you come up with your estimates of what the revenue would be?
So it's based on revenue in other states, and then just dealing with the difference in population. So I don't have an exact or even a survey to come up with the number of Vermonters that are presently participating in this, but we can look at other states that have legalized sports betting, look at their populations, and go from there. I don't know if Vermonters are more or less sports fans than residents of New Hampshire, but it's easy to base it off the population and just look at how much business New Hampshire has done on sports betting. So that's where the numbers came from.
How many states have legal? Could tell us a little bit about the history of sports betting and the Supreme Court case, et cetera?
So there was a Supreme Court case that seemed to allow sports betting. There was a lawsuit that was filed not too long ago, and New Hampshire, Vermont was supplied an amicus brief on this, but New Hampshire and then their particular vendor at the time, this all revolved around the Wire Act and whether Sheldon Adelson, who passed away recently, he was trying to prevent this kind of online activity at some level, and whether that was legal or illegal around sports betting or iLottery. In the end, I think the decision and the Justice Department under the last administration was supporting Mr. Adelson's cause. I believe now that the administration is different, they've taken a different position, but there was some continuing threat potentially around this because all this involves a wire in some way. And Vermont got involved specifically in that case because even our lottery products, information is traveling over the internet or through cellular services. So there's all this issue of whether that would have been impacted as well.
I think we may be missing each other's here.
Sorry.
I thought there was a case 4 or 5 years ago that allowed states to do this. And as a result, my understanding was there are any number of states who have now legalized sports betting.
Well, that is very true. It was allowed, and other than this most recent, recent challenge, which was potentially a threat to its continued existence, but there are many states now that have approved sports betting, and the number just continues to grow. I don't have a number for you, but I can certainly get one and send it back to the committee and let you know how many have already legalized it and how many and have it up and running, and how many are considering. I think there's a large number that are in one camp or the other at this point.
Have you talked to any of the commercial ventures? I don't know if FanDuel or whatever the other one is.
DraftKings.
Have you had any conversations with them, whether they have any estimates on Vermonters who might be using offshore companies right now?
I've had conversations with them, not on that particular topic, but they again provide their own revenue estimates about what we could expect as far as how much would be bet. They have estimates of that. Yes.
If I were to make a bet with an offshore company right now, would that be illegal in Vermont?
It doesn't appear to be illegal in Vermont for you to do that. Again, I think the challenges are if you say you want a big bet, getting paid. That can be one of the challenges. Some of the companies make it very difficult to withdraw your money from their system. So that's one of the challenges. They could just stop responding to you and not pay you. I don't know what recourse you have. Again, I think a regulated, it's just as we talked, or as you all talked about on the cannabis side, a regulated industry is better than an unregulated one. In the end, you can limit who participates, who can purchase the product. You can make sure your citizens are protected. Those are all benefits. And the same as I mentioned on iLottery, as far as problem gambling goes, there are the opportunities for protection of people to, for who appear to be having gambling problem. Just, if it's messages that are sent to them, if letting them know that, cutting themselves off. I mean, those are all options. The offshore businesses are just happy to take the money. They don't have any social responsibility component to their mission. It's just about making as much money as possible.
I don't understand. So when you do revenue estimates, isn't that dependent upon what we would set as a tax rate or however we would tax it, or are you just applying a 6% sales tax or something?
No, it's not a 6% sale tax. It's looking at the business options or contracts that have been entered into in other states. So I specifically looked at New Hampshire. They got what I consider to be a very favorable a contract with their vendor. There's many different ways to sort of skin this as far as revenue goes. I'll tell you my view. What I would like to see. I would like to see the lottery as a regulator over the industry, and for the state to take its money off the top. So money would be a tax or a fee would be on how much was wagered. The way it seems to be done in many places is it's what's left after they've paid all the bills. And in a bill that that was discussed last year, it was after they took all their losses. They could do any advertising they wanted to attract customers. All that took away from the bottom line and what the state would get in the end. And we would have no control over that. If a company wanted to spend all its money on recruiting customers, which they do very aggressively, there might be no profit left to provide the state. And I guess I feel like it would be better for the state to just be more in that regulatory role to make sure that they're following the law and that we get our money up front rather than at the last one to get paid, which is how it looks in some of the other states.
Gary, you're proposing something like an excise tax on sort of in volume of sales.
Exactly, right.
Volume of liquid.
Right. It's on the gross that's bet rather than on, even though they call it gross, one of the misnomers is the industry refers to gross gaming revenue as what we would get a share of, but it isn't really the gross gaming revenue. It's what's left after they, it's the net revenue. It's what's left after they've covered all their costs and all their expenses.
Right. And you're proposing doing basically an excise tax on the gross at
right.
Before everything else is taken out.
Exactly. So it would be, you bet $1, the state would get a percentage of, penny
right.
or whatever it is on the dollar. So,
and you
what I'm trying to understand the interstate relationship. So 5 years ago, whatever, the U.S. Supreme Court came down with a decision that said this kind of enterprise is the states are free to do this, and 20 odd or whatever number you're going to come back to have already passed laws to allow for this. Does that mean that you're saying a Vermonter can't go on the internet and bet in the New Hampshire sports betting parlor because they're not physically present in New Hampshire?
That's in order to bet on their through their mobile application, you have to be within the borders of New Hampshire. As well as the geofencing can work. I mean, they have it down pretty tightly. But again, you might be able to be on the other side of the Connecticut River out, right on the line, and it might be possible that you could place a bet, but it's supposed to be restricted to being actually within the boundaries of the state of New Hampshire.
And so what you said in New Jersey and New York is that some New Yorkers where they don't have this law, in New Jersey where they do, they actually drive into New Jersey and they can place their bet there if they want, if they feel more comfortable of doing it there versus with an offshore company.
Exactly, and that's exactly what they were, they were seeing in this particular parking lot where there was all this transient traffic of people basically driving over, placing their bets, and returning.
What about visitors to Vermont, let's say we had this law and someone came for a ski week, would there be any ability for them to bet on the Vermont site at that point?
Absolutely, because the site would be, if we operated it, I mean, there's a couple different ways to look at it. The way New Hampshire's doing it, they're getting a very high rate of return on what the industry calls gross gaming revenue, and that they're getting, 51% of that, but they only have one vendor. One thing the industry has talked about is that if we had multiple, so if you're a customer on that vendor, so if you're a DraftKings bettor, and you have the app on your phone, as long as you're in a state where DraftKings is operating sports betting, you can go on the site and you can bet. So if we had multiple vendors here, then we would be able to, people visiting could, pull up the app on their phone and be able to place a bet on, on a game in Vermont with one of the approved vendors.
So very simplistically, I'm sorry if I'm dense here. We all know that a lot of people bet on the Super Bowl, and if they're up here skiing at Stowe and they want to bet on the Super Bowl and they're coming from New Hampshire or New Jersey, if they bet with DraftKings and we had a law, we would get the revenue versus nobody getting the revenue, I guess.
Oh, absolutely right. I mean, they placed the bet in Vermont, and so Vermont would be entitled to the share of the revenue on bets that are placed in our state. Yes.
Okay.
Does that explain it?
Yeah, I realize that I've been asking a bunch of questions and I interrupted your presentation. You hadn't gotten very far into it. I don't know if you have more.
No, that I think that gave you the gist of it really in the end.
Well, can you talk about a little bit? I know the concerns have been raised about problem gambling and what are other states experiencing? What do they do to that? Some people, I mean, my biggest concern here is with kids and problem gambling, but it's sort of the same argument that we heard in legalizing marijuana. Is it already going on in an unregulated fashion? Are we losing the opportunity to regulate it, to help people to generate the revenue? And I think we need to know the answers to those questions because the opposition will say, well, you're going to create a culture where you're going to create a lot more gamblers. And, that comes down to a philosophy of whether you want a nanny state or not, or whether you think gambling is entertainment or an addiction. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I'll talk about it.
May I just tag on to that, Mr. Chair? Yeah, the other piece isn't just problem gambling, but it's a big socioeconomic question, which is, the demographic on who's gambling and what percent of, low and super low income people spending a lot of their money on this. I mean, this is a big issue. I know for social, anyway, that's also a big piece of this is the demographic of who's gambling and the disproportionate impact on income.
So I mean, I'll try to address, that's a big area, but I'll do my best to try to address it all. I think from seminars and trainings I've gone to on problem gambling and such, Americans like to gamble. There's not a lot of discussion around that or debate. I think it just seems to be something that Americans enjoy doing. It's not something that I particularly engaged in, but other people are. And I like to ski. I guess that's one of my, my addictions, or I like to ride my bike. And those are expensive activities. And so I try to look at it from that perspective, that these are adults engaging in adult activity. One thing about whether it's iLottery or sports betting, there is age verification that is done as part of that. So, a 12-year-old should not be able to just get on and be able to place bets or play iLottery because of the process that the industry goes through to verify the age of the participants. And they use different third-party services to do that. They'll require a license. They'll require some other kind of identification to make sure that you are of age. Now, if a parent leaves their password around next to their computer for iLottery, where they play iLottery, maybe their kids can get on that way. But the idea is that they wouldn't be able to just set up an account on their own to be able to play. One thing that I think Vermont is doing that's different than elsewhere, many other places in the country, I feel like in the past, the lottery really paid some lip service to the idea of doing something about problem gambling and gambling addiction, in that the lottery gave money to a provider, and it was several providers over the years. And what we actually got for it wasn't what I thought was really anywhere close to optimal. Basically, it was more of a referral service, and we were spending $100,000 or $150,000 a year for someone to make referrals to paid therapists, who then needed to be paid through insurance or some other way. I didn't think that was very efficient or helpful to people. And so we've changed the model dramatically now. We have a contract with the Howard Center, and they will provide free treatment online or in person, although in person has been less so because of COVID, but either one of those to anyone who has a gambling problem. It doesn't have to be related to lottery. It could be related to casinos, horse betting, online sports betting, whatever it happens to be, for free, because the state's paying for it. So instead of our money just going to really a provider to make referrals, the money now goes to pay a clinician to provide free treatment. And so someone doesn't need to be concerned that they have no money because they're spending it on sports betting or lottery or casinos or whatever it is. They don't need to worry that they can't afford it. It's free. We provide it for free. And
Gary, how many people have taken advantage of that opportunity?
So I think a very small number have. March was Problem Gambling Awareness Month. The lottery ran advertising campaign around that. Unfortunately, the time that we entered into the grant agreement with the Howard Center was really, as COVID was ramping up, and the plan had been to offer in person, and now again we've transitioned to the online. I know I personally have made referrals to people that have expressed to me that they're having a problem gambling, and I see that. I get emails from people who are complaining about something related to the lottery, or even one not too long ago from a problem gambler. He acknowledged he had a problem with gambling, and he wanted us to be able to cut him off. If we had iLottery or sports betting, we could just cut him off. But with regular lottery products, that's not really possible, because people pay with cash. We don't know who they are. And they just walk into a store, and they can walk into any one of 600 locations and buy tickets. We don't have posters up there, don't sell to this person. We really just can't expect that to work. But I did provide him information related to where he could get free treatment for problem gambling. And I lauded him for his recognition that he was having a problem, and tried to encourage him to go get the free treatment. And it wasn't going to cost him a penny, that, we paid for it, that he could get it for free. I don't know whether that person took me up on the offer. I hope they did. I alerted the Howard Center to the fact that they should expect contact from this person. But again, ultimately, they'll have to make that call. It's very troubling to me to hear about that, that people get to that point. We want it to be entertainment for people, not to become an addiction or a problem in the end, if that's possible. Anyway, that's a big difference from where we were on problem gambling from previously.
I don't know. I want you to continue, but I keep coming back to this. People who are problem gambling or underage and stuff like that. In terms of, I'm not focused on the lottery, but more on sports betting. What changes in terms of access by Vermont legalizing that? Can a kid go on his phone right now and sign up with someplace in the Cayman Islands and make a bet?
Absolutely. So they have no restrictions. They just want the money. So they're in it for the money. I don't think they have any care about who's placing the bet. As long as they have the money to cover the bet, that's all they care about. If we had it in Vermont, it would be heavily regulated in that we would work with the providers and their third-party verifiers to make sure that they're not letting underage people do it. We could set limits. We could say you can only bet $50 a day. You can only bet $100 a day. You could set limits if you wanted to. We could say that, we see your, what appears to be a problem gambling pattern and send messages to that person about the fact that we have problem gambling treatment available. And if somebody said, I want to stop, but I can't, will you stop me? We could, we could turn them off and not let them, they could self-exclude essentially.
So if we had 100,000 people in Vermont, which I wouldn't be surprised to find out, that are doing sports betting overseas, we have no control over that whatsoever.
No control. Right. No.
They're not protected. Yeah. If we did iLottery, could you set a threshold above which you'd be notified? I mean, a threshold of what the department would consider problem gambling. You could set that threshold for an individual player. And if they go over that dings that you are in touch with them. And, is there?
Absolutely. We have all the, one of the things that we would have that we don't have now is we would know our players. We don't know them now. I mean, they're anonymous to us because it's all done with cash across a counter or at a vending machine. So we would actually know the players. They'd have to register in order to participate on these. They have to show they were of legal age, and we could set thresholds however we wanted. For everyone, we could say, well, you can't put more than $50 a day or spend more than $50 a day. You can't deposit more than X amount of money per day. And there's all different ways to control this that we don't have available to us now. Senator Sorokin, does that answer your question? I hope.
Yeah, it does. Senator Brock?
I'd like to go back to geofencing. Have you found or are you aware whether or not the use of a virtual private network can defeat your geofencing?
I'll have to ask about that. That is a good question. I believe that it will not, because what it does is it requires that your GPS component of your mobile device is enabled and has to be on. So it's actually placing you in a spot on the earth to do it. So having
as opposed to the signal coming through the VPN, in other words.
Right, as opposed to saying, okay, well, you connected to a server in New Hampshire, so we think you're in New Hampshire. That may work for certain things, but because it may be, and my understanding is that at least with some of the providers, your GPS has to be on and enabled for the app to function. And if you don't have that on, then you can't place a bet. So that's how they're
as far as the applications that you use or will be using in order to do iLottery.
Well, that relates. I would say relates more to the sports betting side, but it would be the same. It could be the same for iLottery.
It would be it's iLottery in particular that I was concerned about.
Okay. Yes, I think that's that the GPS is part of it on mobile devices.
Thank you.
So you were going to get back to us on how many states have done this.
I'm taking a note right now.
But have you, in terms of your seminars or research or anything like that, has there been any? It's still relatively new, I guess, within the last 5 or 6 years. But have you heard of any state seeking to repeal or tweak or having a bad experience with this at this point?
I have not. I think all the states that have started with sports betting or iLottery have had good success with it and feel like it works well for them. So I have not heard. I suppose there may be some that have made some small tweaks over time. I don't know, but I can ask around again with either the vendors or the other states that have this.
Is there a great deal of variation at all as to how the 20-odd states that may have done this approach it, or is it pretty much boilerplate?
I think there is variation. So in the District of Columbia, I think they're not necessarily having the best rollout. They chose to do a sole source contract with their lottery system vendor. And so all bets are placed through the lottery terminals. And the return, the way that vendor set it up, the return is not attractive to players. And so as a result, there's another company that is running sports betting either through a mobile device or in person at a sports book. You need to actually be at this location because it's geofenced in order to be able to place a bet on a mobile device or at their sports book. But that's become much more popular than the lottery only channel that the district was offering. So there are definitely different ways that it's being done. There's certainly those states that have Indian gaming or racetracks, and they may just limit to where these bets can be placed at those locations. So, that again, they may have an entrenched, gambling sort of enterprises in their state. So oftentimes that, they may be moving it into those locations or may have to negotiate some arrangement in order to make it work. So again, there are variations from state to state depending on what's already in existence. In Vermont, we don't have any of that, so it's not, we don't have racetracks, we don't have casinos, we don't have those issues.
So, and what about is there any control over the payouts or the odds? I mean, I assume like a place that has sophisticated gambling structures like Nevada maybe has some controls over making sure that there's some fair payout based upon the odds, but I don't know.
Also, players know the odds when they're, at the time they're placing their wager, and the odds can change over time based on how wagering is going in one direction or another. And that's another reason to sort of get the money off the top, because we're relying on this vendor to make good decisions on how they set the odds. And if they don't do that, it comes out of the state share of the money if we get the money off the bottom line rather than from the top line. So that's that's a difference.
In this question, I'm less concerned about the state as I am the players. And we have usury rates on interest, things like that. Is there any control in these states on the companies so that they don't gouge the players?
Well, I think one way to be sure, because it's a competitive environment, it's not really possible to do that. If you don't like what DraftKings is offering, you can go to MGM and bet with them if you have multiple vendors in the state that are offering sports betting. So
the answer is you don't know of any state that's ventured into that at this point.
I'm not aware of any that specifically are trying to control that. I mean, it's back to if you provide, and I think the industry would tell you this, if you provide unattractive payouts, or odds, people just won't bet with you. They'll bet offshore. They'll find somewhere else to do it. Just like, on the cannabis side, you could buy it legally in Massachusetts, but if the prices were too high, people still find a black market provider and do it that way. They won't know what they're getting, but for people that are very price sensitive, that may be the option that they choose. So you have to set things at a place that is market competitive, I guess. And on the industry side, if you have multiple vendors, they're fiercely competitive, I think, is what the experience has been.
Okay. We still have a few more minutes. If anybody has any more questions. Gary, do you have anything more you'd like to say?
Well, the only other, I don't, one of the things that's been discussed in the past is, and I don't know if it's too late this year to move something if there's really not enough time, but I would at least encourage a study of these three. If you don't have time, I know, here we are, we're in April already, to really get into the nitty gritty, and there is a lot of nitty gritty here. It really might benefit from having some kind of a study, and maybe adding a study on to another bill that might be related would be the easiest way to advance the conversation. So I just wanted to put that out there. I will say, because we're talking about revenue side and some of the proposals that were in the administration budget, one of the other items that was in the budget was the possible expansion of Powerball internationally. And under Vermont law, it is not clear. There's no prohibition, I'll put it that way. There's no prohibition to Vermont being participating in an international multi-jurisdictional lottery game. That is not true in other states. Some states have very explicit prohibitions. Vermont doesn't have one. But for the sake of the future look at this, I think it would be helpful for the legislature just to specifically authorize it, because it does look like Powerball, and we are a member of the board of the Powerball group. And so we have a vote, but we're just one of the states. It does look like they're looking at international expansion. It looks like Australia is the first international other opportunity where Powerball would be sold. And so I wanted to just add the words international, where we have this multi-state jurisdictional games are in statute. And I was in the budget. I'm happy to send it to you. I don't know if that would fit in 313. I don't think it's offensive to anyone. There's no prohibition on it now. It would just be a clarification that it was specifically allowed. The other component to that was to increase, there's a number, a limit on the number of multi-jurisdictional games that the Vermont Lottery can engage in. I'm not really sure why that's in there. I don't have necessarily a group of games that we would suddenly join if the number were increased, but it just, if the game's appealing and looks like it would be appealing to players in Vermont, it would be nice to be able to offer it. But we have a limit now to the number of multi-jurisdictional games we can participate in. So that was.
Gary, I thought we had discussed this, the international Powerball. I thought for some unknown reason, I thought we'd actually taken action on it.
We did discuss it last at the sort of last part of the last session last fall or summer and fall, and we didn't. Yeah. It didn't end up advancing, and so it was put in the budget again this year. I believe that the House budget writers, they took it out. The question was asked whether it was essential, and I being very honest, I couldn't say that if we didn't have it, we would, we'd have to drop out of the game. But so from that perspective, they decided it wasn't necessary or it wasn't essential, and they didn't include it. But it could be included, maybe in 313. And again, I don't think there's a lot of opposition one way or the other on it. It just
what is the downside of on the international one of not putting that word in now? I mean, some people might want to hear more testimony on that, but if it's totally innocuous, are we in danger that if the board joins with Australia, that we're thrown out of the game until such time as we come back and change that law?
No, and that's why I was saying it wasn't essential, because the law as it's drafted now, the statute as it exists, doesn't have a prohibition. So I can tell you, my colleague from the state of Idaho is going to have to withdraw from the Powerball game, even though that's a pretty big seller in his state, because it's specifically prohibited that he can't participate in games that are not in North America, basically. Although there are, it can include American territories. So he's going to have to drop out of the game. There was a story in the New York Times on that recently with a lovely photo of him. I let him know. But it's, in Vermont, it's much less clear than that. I mean, it specifically says he can't be involved with games outside North America or US territory. So that's his issue. Our issue, it's less clear. I just was trying to get some clarification. Again, I don't know that there's would be any opposition to it. If there was something that said we couldn't participate, then we would have to drop out of the game as well. But we wouldn't have to do that under the present language. It's just not clear. I just like to make it clear. Maybe I should just leave well enough alone and just say it's not clear, so we're just going to stay in. That's the plan. But clarification would just be helpful, I think, to anyone in the future. I'm sorry, I think you're muted, Senator Sorokin.
You're right. Thank you. So the administration's position on these gambling proposals is they support all three. Are they a package in any way?
It wasn't a package. They were all revenue that were included in the governor's budget proposal. So it was revenue that was booked in the next year based on the addition of this lottery modernization.
And it was just 1 year's, that was, projections for second and third years, but what was the number on each of them again?
So the first year, I'd say we'd be looking between $6 and $9 million in total between the three games. And to be fair, I mean, we really need to, we have to roll them out. They're not just going to, if you pass the law now and it goes into effect in July, and I know that, they're not going to suddenly appear July 1st. It will take some time to, get contracts and roll things out. So 12 months, that's the revenue we would expect.
Okay, thank you.
It is 6 to 9 million, right?
That's right. Through the first 12 months. But again, my expectation is
was there any dedication of that money, like for problem gambling or anything like that in the budget?
No, we already have money in the budget that relates to problem gambling. And when we've talked to our, to the money committees about that, I actually specifically told them that if we needed additional funds, I would seek that. I did ask for additional money and was, it was provided. So there, it was reduced at one point before I got involved. They asked if we needed more, and I told them I didn't know, and that I would have to look to how we were going to change this program. And then once I decided how we were going to change it, I asked for additional funds to make sure we could fully fund that. And so the money committees were fine with providing that. So it hasn't been an issue.
Okay, so now I'm confused.
Mhm.
So you asked for additional.
That was
money
last year. Sorry, I don't mean to confuse you. That was last year's budget.
last year. Okay.
Mhm.
We're right. So what I hear you asking for is the international Powerball and a study on these three additional pieces if we don't have time to actually take them all up.
That would be a very good step, I think. Yes.
Okay. I think we need to get to the floor, sadly.
Okay. Yep. We got
That's
5
all I had to say. Anyway, happy to answer more questions if you have any and get
Thanks.
you more information.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank
You're very
you,
welcome.
Commissioner Gary and
And
Matt. Very interesting morning. Thank you.
You're
Bye-bye.
welcome. Bye.